Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. I wanted to discuss the subject of transformation and how it relates to both Maoism, third worldism, and the critical realism of Roy Bhaskar. In effect, in this podcast, I will be juxtaposing critical realism with Maoism, third worldism, showing how they are not only compatible, but they can, if understood in the right way, be made to depend upon one another. As far as I know, and I don't mean to be arrogant in saying this, I am the only person in the world who is both a Maoist third worldist and a Bhaskarian critical realist. If I am not, then please correct me. But as far as I know, that is true. Why do I say that? Well, a couple of reasons. One, because I know almost every major critical realist in the world, or I have read her or his work. Do I know every major Maoist third worldist in the world? No. But I am certainly familiar with the literature of Maoism, third worldism, and I am not aware of anything in that literature which would touch on the subject of critical realism. And yet I think that both critical realism has a lot to offer to Maoism, third worldism, and Maoism, third worldism in turn has a lot to offer to the critical realism of Roy Bhaskar. Now, we have discussed both critical realism and Maoism, third worldism in somewhat depth before, so there's no need for me to cover old ground. Instead, I will be talking about the juxtaposition of those two basic perspectives. In doing so, I will focus primarily on that chart behind me, which goes from absence to absenting the absence to transformation. That is the basis for what Roy Bhaskar called his dialectical critical realism, which was one of the four major turns of Roy's critical realism. Throughout his life, Roy had a number of different ideas. He originally developed critical realism through his inspiration from Anthony Giddens' structuration theory. His friend Margaret Archer, who just recently died, pointed out to him, Roy, your views and the views of Anthony Giddens are not exactly the same. To Anthony Giddens, structure and agency are basically the same. But you are saying no, they are not basically the same. They are different. Roy was eventually persuaded by Maggie's argument, and he accepted that, and thus was the beginning of critical realism, which culminated before Roy's death several years ago in his philosophy of critical realism. In the philosophy of meta-reality, which was the final turn of Roy's critical realism. Let's start with the idea of structure and agency, and then work our way to that chart which goes from absence to transformation. First, agency is something that we all have, and it is something that we should all want to have. It is not something that we should ever, under any circumstances, give up. Unfortunately, there is a movement, I guess you could call it a social movement or a quasi-medical movement, not really medical, but quasi-medical, I guess is a good term for it, which really presents the option of giving up one's personal agency. Agency means action or free will. Without action or free will, what are we? I don't know. But to me, without action or free will, we are not entirely human beings. For what is a human being except someone who can act especially for the purpose of transforming the world. And so agency is essential to the being of humanity, to the current of humanity, and to the continuance, I would say, of humanity. Without agency, there is no guarantee that we as human beings will continue. Why? Well, the world changes all the time. Many of those changes are totally outside of the control of human beings. I have no control over the weather, for example. I have no control over what Iran does in Gaza or in Iran. I have no control over virtually anything that goes on in global policy or politics. That is one area where I cannot exercise my personal agency. Where I can exercise my personal agency is based on how I respond to it. And one of those responses can be conscientization, which is what I'm doing right now in making this podcast. Again, critical conscience and consciousness raising, trying to allow the world to become familiar with critical realism and with Maoism, third worldism, as solutions for the problems, the multiple levels of problems that we now face as a world, as a globe. Sometimes I feel hopeless. And I think that sense of hopelessness comes across in my podcasts. For that, I can only say that I am sorry, but I don't know how to avoid it, because that is literally how I feel. My sense of hopelessness is born out of love, out of a feeling of inability to use my agency to bring about social change in the society in which we live. Now, how can I understand that society? Well, if we believe Anthony Giddens, the structure of society and agency are intimately connected, almost one and the same. But that is not what Roy Bhaskar believed. To him, they are related but distinct. So I look at the structure around me. I look at the problems in that structure. And I ask myself, what is the basic cause of those problems? And the answer which comes to me is global capitalism, the capitalist world system. It is that capitalist world system which produces racism, sexism, ageism, ableism, and all the forms of oppression which hold us back, both as individuals and as societies. And if we want to get beyond that, to make some meaningful progress, then we have to find some way of transforming that structure in a way which is effective. And it would appear that so far in the world, We have not discovered that. Instead, we seem to be in a continual battle with one another, each person trying to become the king of the house, so to speak. Each person to rise to the top of the pecking order. And that may be personally enjoyable for some people, not for me, but for some people. But it is not going to bring about any kind of meaningful change in the social structure, in the capitalist social structure in which we are immersed. So instead, I need to discover the proper types of agency that I can use as an individual, and the proper types of agency that collectively we can use as the proletariat and the subaltern to bring about meaningful change, long-lasting and abiding change in society, in social structure. And so far, we certainly have not found that. But I think that the answer is within reach. And that is what Roy Bhaskar conveyed to us in his dialectical critical realism. He said, for example, that before any act of agency, whether by an individual or by a group, we have an absence. An absence is something that is missing. We have a lot of things that are missing in the world today. Too many things even to remember. One of the main things that we are missing is genuine love, compassion, loving kindness, empathy for one another. Instead, we seem closer to Ayn Rand's objectivism, which is based on selfishness, than we do to Roy Bhaskar's critical realism, which is based upon transformation and how we get to the point of transforming ourselves from selfish beings, from beings who live on the plane of what Roy called demi-reality, which was his translation of the Sanskrit word Maya, illusion, can also be rendered as disunity or splitting, to co-presence, which is unity, which is togetherness. And so until we discover that means of getting from demi-reality to co-presence, we are not going to see any real transformation in society. But it begins with me. It begins with me. That's what Roy always said, that the route to communism begins with the individual. I need to commit myself to overcoming my own demi-reality and to living on my own plane of co-presence. I need to focus on my own agency, on my own free will, on my own activity, and how I can use that agency to bring about a transformation in social structure. But we have not done that. And I don't think that we are that close to doing that quite yet. But so what? There is always a beginning to everything. If we have not started, we can start now. There was a time in my life when I had no idea of how I would make the transition from demi-reality to co-presence in my own life to experience my own personal transformation. I will not claim that I have fully discovered it yet. That would be an overstatement, and I think a statement of pure arrogance. But I will say, and I think I can say this honestly, that I have discovered a way to begin the journey from demi-reality to co-presence, to begin it through agency, leading to a transformed social structure eventually, and leading to social transformation, a transformed society, and ultimately a transformed world. Now, when I gaze around the world around me, what do I see? I suppose I could put that question to you. What do you see? Perhaps we will come up with similar responses. Maybe not, but perhaps. But I can tell you what I see. I see a world of separation, of demi-reality, of absence, as in the chart right behind me on the screen. Absence and demi-reality are almost identical concepts. Throughout his career, Roy developed critical realism through many stages. And sometimes when he would embark upon a new stage or turn, he would come up with a new terminology to describe something that he had already discussed before. And I think that is basically what he did with the concept of demi-reality. He used demi-reality to explain absence. Except now, by looking at it as demi-reality, absence is not just something that we are missing. Absence is an actual condition of existence. Absence is our own lower nature, our own human nature, our nature which is untouched by the power of transformation. Most people, I think, are living in a world of absence or demi-reality. And that is sad. But we see that in the world all around us. I see it myself. I see it among my family, what I have left of it, which is not much. I see it among my friends. I see it among my neighbors and my acquaintances. There is a feeling of dread, an understandable dread. When I look at the world around me, I sometimes feel that dread myself, as you can tell from my podcasts, especially looking at Gaza and Iran and the daily change in policy or attempted policy by Israel, by the United States, and by other countries toward Gaza and Iran. And I sometimes feel like a powerless man, that there is nothing that I can do about it. But then I think of Roy Bhaskar, and I think of Roy Bhaskar's concept of agency. It is agency which makes me powerful. I am powerful. You are powerful too. Whatever your current situation, and obviously I don't know what it is, I don't even know who's watching me right now. But regardless of whatever your situation might be, you are not a prisoner to it. You can be liberated. You can be freed from that condition of demi-reality, of absence. It is an absence because we have an absence of co-presence. We have an absence of unity. And that is ultimately what needs to change. And so the ultimate point, I think, in our lives is to reach out to others, to get out of myself. It is so easy, I know for me, to get lost in myself and my own personal problems, and to forget the problems which affect the surrounding world, which are much worse than my own problems. Whenever I think of my own problems, all I need to do is to think of Gaza and Rafah and Haiti and so many other places where people are literally living on the brink. People are in a condition of absence, but not due to their own action, due to their own inability to change the world for them. And so I, as a critical realist and as a Maoist third worldist, see my own role as one of helping other people to become transformed human beings, a new kind of human being, a kind of human being that I had never conceived of until a few decades ago when I first encountered critical realism. And then especially when 20 years ago, I had my magnificent experience with Horia, the black-eyed maiden of white light, who gave me empathy. So now, although I don't know you, and most likely will never know you, I love you, and I care for you, and I wish only the best for you. I want to see you liberated from absence, from demi-reality, just as much as I want to see myself liberated from it, or perhaps even more so, because by my focusing upon the conscientization of others, I am also helping myself by being a servant, by seeing myself in the position of a servant. Then I am fulfilling my purpose in life, which is, I believe, to free the world from its present quagmire of capitalism, a quagmire that has been around us for a long, long time. And capitalism is based purely on absence and demi-reality. Therefore, those like Ayn Rand who worshipped capitalism literally worshipped demi-reality or absence. Why? Why would any person worship absence? Why would any person worship demi-reality, illusion, Maya, splitting, or separation? I know in a sense why That is, because perhaps at one time in my life, although I would not say I worshipped demi-reality, I would say that I was trapped in it as an autistic, and I did not know how to escape from it. And it was Horia who showed me the path to reaching outside of myself and touching the hearts of others. And that has made me into a new creature, hopefully a transformed creature. So, through the process of my own agency, changing the structure of the world from one based on greed or capitalism to one based on love or communism, through that process, we can experience genuine transformation. And I can't imagine why anyone, when given the opportunity to become a transformed, a renewed human being, would turn it down. And yet, by the same token, I have encountered many people who have. Many people, including members of my own family. And my heart goes out to them. Most of them are deceased. And so I can only turn to them and hope that wherever they are, that the opportunity for transformation is given to them once again. But I can transform myself through agency and through transforming social structure. I can become a transformed human being. We can all become transformed human beings. And I hope that at this moment in your life, at a time when the world appears to be crumbling, to me as well, there is no better time to search for transformation than at a time when all hope seems to be lost. I don't know if that will have any meaning to anyone. I hope so, because transformation should be the goal of every one of us. What else do we have to live for except to become transformed, transmuted, renewed human beings? But it all begins with an act of agency, with an act of will. And so when they say in the 12-step program, we should give up our will, recognize that we are powerless, all I feel is a sense of sorrow. Because precisely the opposite is the solution. We do not become transformed human beings, whether from a substance abuse problem or anything else, by giving up our will, but by strengthening our will, by strengthening our agency. Through that means, social structure can be transformed. We can move from a society based on greed, based on selfishness, based on demi-reality or Maya, to one based on co-presence, on love, on unity, indeed, on reunion. For the time being, this has been Mark, by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.